Thanksgiving dinner at the Morrison family estate was always an exercise in endurance, but this year felt particularly brutal. I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, picking at my turkey while my father held court at the head, pontificating about Morrison Technology's latest quarterly earnings. Revenue up 18%, Dad announced, raising his wine glass. The institutional investors are extremely pleased. We're projecting $400 million for the fiscal year. My brother Colin, seated at Dad's right hand as always, beamed. The new manufacturing partnership in Taiwan is exceeding projections. We should see another 12% growth next quarter. Excellent work, son. Dad's approval was visible, warm. Then his eyes landed on me. Rachel, are you following this? Or is corporate finance still beyond your comprehension? I swallowed my bite of stuffing. I'm following. Really? Because last time we discussed business, you seemed confused about the difference between revenue and profit. He smiled indulgently and several cousins chuckled. It's fine if you don't understand these things. Not everyone has a head for numbers. I understand perfectly well. Do you? Mom interjected from her position at Dad's left. Because when you tried to give Colin investment advice last summer, you suggested he diversify into index funds. Index funds, Rachel. Like some amateur retail investor. Diversification is sound financial strategy. For people with small portfolios, Colin interrupted. Real investors, people with actual capital, use more sophisticated approaches. But I wouldn't expect you to know that. My sister Lauren, home from her executive position in New York, added helpfully, Rachel, there's no shame in not understanding high finance. You're an artist. That's your thing. Stick to what you know. I was a graphic designer. I ran a small but successful studio. But to my family, anything that wasn't corporate executive work was essentially a hobby. I actually do understand. I started. Sweetheart, Dad said, his tone dripping with condescension, you make a decent living with your little design business. That's wonderful. But please don't pretend to understand real business. Morrison Technologies operates at a level that requires years of experience and education to comprehend. I went to Wharton, Dad. Same as Colin. Yes, and then you chose to waste that education on graphic design instead of joining the family business. He sighed dramatically. Your choice, of course. But it does mean you're too far removed from serious finance to contribute meaningfully to these discussions. My Uncle Richard spoke up from across the table. Elizabeth, isn't Morrison Technologies going public soon? I've been considering investing. We're in preliminary discussions, Mom confirmed. Though our stock would likely be too expensive for most individual investors. We're targeting institutional money, pension funds, investment firms, serious capital. Too poor to invest in real business essentially, Dad said, looking directly at me. No offense, Rachel, but on your salary, you couldn't afford a meaningful position in Morrison Technologies even if we allowed retail investors. I set down my fork carefully. How much do you think a meaningful position would cost? Several million at minimum. The IPO is expected to value us at $2.2 billion. To have actual influence, you'd need to acquire at least 5 to 10% of outstanding shares. He chuckled. So unless your design clients are paying you dramatically more than I think, you're priced out. Colin grinned. Don't feel bad, sis. Most people are priced out. That's kind of the point. We want shareholders who understand what they're investing in. I took a sip of water and said nothing. Lauren leaned forward. Rachel, honest question. Do you even understand what Morrison Technologies does? Like specifically? You manufacture specialized microprocessors for industrial applications. See, that's what I mean. That's the surface-level explanation. The real business is far more complex. Licensing agreements, patent portfolios, supply chain optimization, strategic partnerships across 3 continents. She smiled sympathetically. It's okay to not grasp it all. Most people don't. I grasp it fine. Then explain our Taiwan partnership's value proposition, Colin challenged. I could have. I'd read their quarterly filings, analyzed their supply chain, and understood their competitive positioning better than Colin likely did. But I'd learned years ago that proving my knowledge to this family was pointless. They'd already decided I was the unsuccessful daughter, the one who'd squandered her potential. So instead I said, pass the cranberry sauce, please. Dad laughed. Smart girl. Know your limitations. There's wisdom in that. The rest of dinner continued in the same vein. My family discussed business I apparently couldn't comprehend, investments I was too poor to make, and strategies beyond my understanding. I ate quietly and checked my phone under the table. A text from my financial advisor, Catherine. Final acquisition complete. You now own 67.3% of Morrison Technologies common stock. Congratulations. I typed back, thanks. Execute the next phase Monday morning. Confirmed. The shareholders' meeting notice will be filed at 9 a.m. I slipped my phone away and resumed eating. Across the table, Colin was explaining to our cousins why Morrison Technologies' upcoming IPO would make the family even wealthier. Conservative estimates put Dad's stake at $800 million. My shares should be worth around $90 million. What about Rachel? My youngest cousin asked innocently. The table went silent for a beat. Then Mom said gently, Rachel isn't part of the business, dear. She chose a different path. By different path, Mom means she chose poverty and irrelevance, Lauren said, trying to make it sound like a joke. But she's happy, right, Rachel? Doing your little designs. Very happy, I said evenly. Dad raised his glass. To family. Even when we make different choices about success. Everyone drank except me. I left right after dessert, claiming an early morning deadline. Nobody tried very hard to convince me to stay. The drive back to my downtown loft took 40 minutes. Once inside, I poured myself a Real drink, 18-year-old Scotch, not the mediocre wine my parents served, and opened my laptop. Catherine had sent over the final documentation. Through a network of shell companies, investment vehicles, and carefully structured purchases over the past 2 years, I now own 67.3% of Morrison Technologies' outstanding common stock. My family had no idea. 2 years ago, I'd sold my design studio to a major marketing conglomerate for $180 million. The studio they dismissed as a little design business had actually been one of the fastest-growing creative agencies in the country, with Fortune 500 clients and international offices. I'd kept the sale quiet, maintained a small freelance practice to avoid questions, and invested the money carefully. Some went into diversified holdings, some into real estate, and a significant portion went into systematically acquiring Morrison Technologies stock from the dozens of small shareholders who'd invested in the company over the years. My father thought Morrison Technologies was family-controlled. He owned 35%. My mother owned 12%. Colin had 8%. Various uncles, aunts, and cousins held another 15%. That left 30% distributed among early investors, former employees, and small stakeholders. I bought all of it. Every share. Then I'd bought out 2 of my uncles who were looking to liquidate, and 1 of my aunts who needed cash for a real estate investment. I'd even bought 5% from my mother when she'd wanted to fund Lauren's business venture, though Mom had sold through a broker and never knew I was the buyer. When I totaled it up, 67.3% ownership. Morrison Technologies wasn't going public. It was already mine. The shareholders' meeting notice was filed Monday morning at 9 a.m. sharp. By 9:07 my phone started ringing. I ignored the first dozen calls, from my father, from Colin, from the company's corporate attorney. I was in a meeting with my own legal team, finalizing the documentation. The notice is properly filed, my attorney confirmed. As majority shareholder, you have the right to call a special meeting and propose any agenda items you want, including board dissolution. How quickly can we execute? The meeting must be held within 30 days of notice. I'd recommend 2 weeks, enough time for proper procedure, not so much that they can mount an effective defense. 2 weeks. Perfect. My phone buzzed again. A text from Colin. What the hell is this? Who is Meridian Holdings Group? Dad is losing his mind. Meridian Holdings Group was one of my primary investment vehicles. I didn't respond. Another text, this time from Lauren. Rachel, do you know anything about a hostile takeover attempt on Morrison Tech? Dad's freaking out. I turned off my phone. The next 2 weeks were chaos, though I observed it from a distance. Catherine kept me updated on the family's increasingly frantic attempts to identify the mysterious majority shareholder who'd seemingly appeared from nowhere. They hired investigators, reviewed shareholder records, and tried to trace the ownership through the maze of legal entities. They never suspected me. Why would they? I was too poor to understand finance, too removed from real business to be a threat. The corporate attorney, who I'd be replacing after the board dissolution, sent certified letters requesting a meeting with the Meridian Holdings representative. I declined. My father gave interviews to business press about opportunistic investors trying to steal the family company. He positioned himself as the defender of Morrison Technologies' legacy, the guardian protecting against corporate raiders. It would have been convincing if he'd actually been the majority owner. 10 days before the shareholders' meeting, I finally answered one of my father's calls. Rachel, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days. Have you seen the news about Morrison Technologies? I've seen it. This is a disaster. Some investment group has acquired a controlling stake. We're trying to fight it, but the legal situation is complex. I need to liquidate some assets quickly to buy shares on the open market, try to counter their position. He paused. I know we don't usually discuss finances with you, but do you have any savings? Anything you could invest in the company? We need all the friendly shareholders we can get. How much would you need? Any amount helps. Even $50,000 or $100,000 would show family solidarity. We could give you shares at a discount, make it worth your while. I don't have that kind of liquid capital, Dad. I'm just a designer, remember? Too poor to invest in real business. Rachel, this isn't the time for... He stopped himself. Look, I'm sorry if we've been dismissive of your career. You're successful in your own way. But this is a crisis. The family company is under attack. What exactly is being attacked? Your control. Our legacy. Everything your grandfather built. This company has been in the Morrison family for 40 years. We can't let some faceless corporation take it over. Why not? If they paid fair market value for the shares, didn't they earn the ownership? That's not how it works. You don't understand. He caught himself again. Please. If you have any money at all, any investments you can liquidate, we need it now. I'll pay you back double after we resolve this. I'll think about it. Rachel. I hung up. The shareholders' meeting was scheduled for a Wednesday morning at the Morrison Technologies headquarters. I arrived 30 minutes early, dressed in a sharp navy suit I'd purchased specifically for the occasion. The receptionist looked confused when I walked in. Ms. Morrison? Are you here for the meeting? I don't have you on the attendee list. I'm representing Meridian Holdings Group. Her eyes widened. Oh. I'll let them know you're here. I waited in the lobby, watching through the glass walls as the conference room filled with confused-looking board members. My father stood at the head of the table, looking older than I remembered, his face drawn with stress. Colin sat beside him, frantically typing on his laptop. Mom was there too, along with several uncles, the corporate attorney, and a few executives I recognized from company photos. At exactly 10 a.m. I walked into the conference room. My father glanced up, annoyed. Rachel, this is a closed shareholders meeting. You need to... He stopped mid-sentence as recognition hit. What are you doing here? I set my briefcase on the table and pulled out a folder. I'm here as the representative of Meridian Holdings Group, the majority shareholder. The room went absolutely silent. Colin found his voice first. That's not funny, Rachel. It's not a joke. I slid the folder across the table to the corporate attorney. Complete documentation of share ownership. As you'll see, Meridian Holdings Group, along with associated entities, owns 67.3% of Morrison Technologies common stock. I control those entities. The attorney opened the folder, his face going pale as he reviewed the documents. This appears to be legitimate. It is legitimate, I confirmed. I've been acquiring shares for 2 years. Small purchases, structured through multiple investment vehicles to avoid triggering disclosure requirements until I'd secured majority control. My father's face had gone from confused to red. That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money. Where would you even? I sold my design studio 2 years ago. For $180 million. I've been investing the proceeds strategically. You sold what? Mom's voice was faint. Your little design business was worth $180 million? It wasn't a little business. It was a highly successful agency with international operations and Fortune 500 clients. But you never asked about it beyond the condescending questions, so you never learned the details. Lauren shook her head. This is insane. Even if you sold a company for that much, you'd have spent it by now. Nobody just sits on that kind of cash. I didn't sit on it. I invested it. Index funds, real estate, emerging markets, and a controlling stake in Morrison Technologies. I looked at Colin. You know, the kind of diversification strategy you mocked me for suggesting. It works quite well. The corporate attorney was still reviewing documents, checking them against shareholder records on his laptop. Ms. Morrison, this ownership appears to be legitimate, but there are procedures for these kinds of transitions. You can't just. Actually, I can. As majority shareholder, I've called this meeting to propose immediate dissolution of the current board and appointment of a new board of directors. I have sufficient votes to pass this measure unilaterally. This is a hostile takeover, my father shouted, of your own family's company. This is a legitimate exercise of shareholder rights in a company where I own more than 2/3 of outstanding shares. I kept my voice calm. You've spent years telling me I don't understand business. Let me demonstrate how well I understand it. Rachel, please. Mom's voice shook. This is your father's legacy. Your grandfather's company. You can't destroy it. I'm not destroying anything. I'm restructuring ownership and management to reflect actual shareholder interests. Which, since I'm the majority shareholder, means my interests. Colin leaned forward. What do you want? Money? You want us to buy back the shares? Name your price. I don't want money. I have plenty of money. What I want is control of a company that I now legally own the majority of. You can't run this company, my father said, his voice desperate. You don't know the industry, the technology, the partnerships. You'd run it into the ground. I don't plan to run it personally. I plan to hire qualified management, which may or may not include current family members, depending on their competence and attitude. Their attitude? Lauren's voice rose. This is about revenge? Because we hurt your feelings at Thanksgiving. This is about business. The same business you've spent my entire adult life telling me I'm too stupid and too poor to understand. I opened my briefcase and pulled out more documents. I've conducted a thorough analysis of Morrison Technologies' operations. Your Taiwan partnership that Colin is so proud of? It's overpriced and underperforming. We could get better terms elsewhere. Your patent portfolio is strong, but you're underutilizing it. There are licensing opportunities you're not pursuing. And your executive compensation is absurdly high relative to company performance. The room stared at me. So here's what's going to happen, I continued. The board will be dissolved. I'll appoint a new board with independent directors who actually understand corporate governance. We'll hire a consulting firm to review operations and recommend improvements. Executive compensation will be restructured to align with performance. And we'll implement the strategic changes necessary to maximize shareholder value. Which means your value, Colin said bitterly. I own 67.3% of the company. Of course it means my value. That's how ownership works. My father stood abruptly. I won't let you do this. I'll fight this in court. I'll sue for improper acquisition for something. There has to be a legal remedy. The corporate attorney spoke quietly. Mr. Morrison, if these documents are legitimate, and they appear to be, she has the legal right to do everything she's proposing. Majority shareholders have significant authority in private companies. Then we'll go public. We'll dilute her shares by issuing new stock to institutional investors. You can't go public without board approval, I pointed out. And in about 10 minutes there won't be a board. Just me as majority shareholder, appointing new directors who will follow my strategic direction. Mom was crying now, quiet tears running down her face. Rachel, how can you do this to your own family? How could you spend 30 years treating me like I was too incompetent to understand the business you worked in? How could you mock my career, dismiss my education, and exclude me from every meaningful family discussion about the company? Kept my voice level. This isn't revenge, Mom. This is correction. You all made assumptions about my capabilities and my resources. Those assumptions were wrong. So you're punishing us, Colin said. I'm exercising my rights as majority shareholder. If that feels like punishment, maybe examine why you find it so threatening to have me in control. My Uncle Richard cleared his throat. Rachel, I sold you shares. Through a broker about 18 months ago. I didn't know it was you buying. I know. If I'd known, you would have refused to sell? Or you would have charged me more? Or you would have warned Dad? I smiled slightly. That's exactly why I didn't tell you. The vote was a formality. With 67.3% ownership, the outcome was predetermined. The board was dissolved. I appointed 5 new directors, 3 independent experts in technology manufacturing, 1 financial analyst, and myself. The meeting adjourned in stunned silence. As people filed out, my father approached me alone. The anger had drained from his face, replaced by something that looked like exhaustion. I underestimated you, he said quietly. Yes. Your mother and I thought we were motivating you, pushing you to succeed by pointing out your shortcomings. You were telling me I was incompetent. There's a difference. He nodded slowly. I see that now. Too late, but I see it. He looked at me with something that might have been respect. What happens now? To me, to the company? That depends. Are you actually competent at running Morrison Technologies, or have you been coasting on the infrastructure my grandfather built? His jaw tightened. I've grown this company 300% since I took over. In a market that grew 400%. You've actually underperformed your competitors. I'd done the research. But you're not incompetent, just complacent, and surrounded by yes-men who don't challenge your assumptions. Like my son. Colin has potential. He's smart, he understands the technology. But he's more interested in appearing successful than in doing the work of actually being successful. I softened slightly. He learned that from watching you. My father absorbed that. Are you firing me? I'm restructuring your role. You'll report to the new CEO. I'm hiring someone with actual expertise in scaling manufacturing companies. Your compensation will be tied to performance metrics, not just revenue. And you'll have oversight, people who will question your decisions and push back when you're wrong. That sounds like a demotion. It sounds like accountability. Something this company has lacked. He studied me for a long moment. You really did understand everything we discussed at Thanksgiving. The Taiwan partnership, the financial structures, all of it. I have an MBA from Wharton and 2 years of systematic research into your company. Of course I understood it. But you let us mock you. You didn't defend yourself. I was gathering information. And honestly, I wanted to see how far you'd go with the condescension. I picked up my briefcase. Turns out pretty far. Rachel. He stopped me at the door. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. You deserved better from us. Yes. I did. I left him standing in the empty conference room. The next few months were intense. The new board implemented sweeping changes, renegotiated the Taiwan partnership, restructured executive compensation, and brought in new management talent. Colin was demoted from VP to director level, where he could learn the business without being in charge of it. Lauren, who'd been angling for a position at Morrison Technologies, was politely informed that all hiring decisions now went through HR and required demonstrated qualifications. My father adapted better than I expected. With actual oversight and accountability, he became more focused, more strategic. He'd been coasting for years, but given proper motivation, he was still capable. The company's performance improved. Within 6 months, we'd increased efficiency by 14% and secured 3 new major contracts. The institutional investors my father had courted for the IPO were now approaching us for private equity positions, which we considered selectively. Thanksgiving rolled around again. The invitation to the family dinner arrived via email from my mother. I almost declined, but curiosity won out. The atmosphere was dramatically different from the previous year. I arrived to find my father greeting me at the door personally, offering to take my coat like I was an honored guest rather than the disappointment daughter. At dinner, the seating arrangement had changed. I was positioned near the head of the table, with my father on one side and the space for my mother on the other. Colin was polite, almost deferential. Rachel, I wanted to thank you for the feedback you gave on the supplier diversification project. You were right about the risk concentration. You're welcome. Lauren, visiting from New York, was notably quieter than usual. She managed a tight smile when I sat down but didn't engage me in conversation. My mother spent most of the meal looking uncomfortable, occasionally glancing at me like she was trying to figure out who I'd become. Halfway through dinner, my father stood to make a toast. I want to acknowledge someone who taught this family an important lesson this year. Rachel, you showed us that our assumptions about success, about competence, about who deserves respect, all of it was built on flawed premises. You're a better businessperson than I gave you credit for. You're a better investor than Colin acknowledged. And you had every right to do exactly what you did. The table was silent, everyone staring at their plates or at me. I'm not going to pretend this has been comfortable, he continued. Having my daughter take control of my company because I underestimated her is humbling, to say the least. But Morrison Technologies is performing better than it has in years, and that's because you brought accountability and expertise that we were lacking. He raised his glass. To Rachel, who proved that sometimes the person we dismiss is the person we should have been listening to all along. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was something. People drank, though the atmosphere remained awkward. After dinner, my mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. Rachel, I need to say something. Okay. I was a terrible mother to you. Not in dramatic ways, but in constant small ways. I made you feel less than, unimportant, incapable. And I did it because... He paused, searching for words. Because it was easier than acknowledging that you'd chosen a different path and succeeded on your own terms. I couldn't handle that you didn't need the family business, didn't need our approval, didn't need anything from us. You're right. I'm sorry. Genuinely, deeply sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I see what I did wrong. I looked at my mother, at the woman who'd spent 30 years making me feel inadequate, and felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. Thank you for saying that. Can we try again? Not go back to how things were, but build something new. Maybe. I don't know yet. She nodded. That's fair. Colin found me before I left. Hey, can we talk for a minute? We stepped out onto the back patio where the November air was sharp and cold. I was an ass to you, he said bluntly. For years. I enjoyed feeling superior, smarter, more successful. And when you turned out to actually be all those things, I couldn't handle it. No, you couldn't. I'm trying to learn. The new role you put me in, it's humbling. I thought I knew the business, but I was really just coasting on Dad's authority. Having to actually prove myself, justify my decisions, work without the family name protecting me, it's hard. That's kind of the point. I know. And I'm grateful for it, even though it sucks. He smiled ruefully. You're a better sibling than I deserve. You could have fired me entirely. Instead, you gave me a chance to actually learn the business. You're smart, Colin. You just needed accountability. Yeah. I'm getting that now. He paused. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. What you built with your design studio, what you did with Morrison Technologies. It's impressive. I should have said that years ago. Yes. You should have. I drove home that night feeling lighter than I had in years. The family wasn't fixed. Years of dysfunction don't resolve in one dinner. But something had shifted. They'd been forced to see me clearly, and while the process had been painful for everyone, it had been necessary. Morrison Technologies thrived under the new management structure. Within 2 years, we doubled revenue and secured our position as one of the leading specialized processor manufacturers in North America. The stock I'd acquired for roughly $340 million was now worth over $800 million. My father remained CEO, but he'd evolved into a better leader. More collaborative, more willing to admit mistakes, more focused on sustainable growth than ego. Colin had developed into a genuinely competent executive, learning from his demotions and becoming more thoughtful in his approach. Lauren eventually joined the company in a marketing role, where she actually excelled once she stopped trying to trade on the family name. Me. I maintained my majority ownership, attended board meetings, and provided strategic direction. But I also returned to design work, launching a new boutique studio that focused on work I found meaningful rather than profitable. The family still had dinners. The dynamics were different now. More honest, less performative. We'd never be the warm, supportive family I'd wished for as a kid, but we'd become something more real. At one dinner, my youngest cousin asked me, Rachel, is it true you bought most of Grandpa's company without anyone knowing? It's true. Why? Because everyone assumed I couldn't, and I wanted to prove them wrong. My father, overhearing, added quietly, and she did. Quite conclusively. The family that had mocked me for being too poor to invest in real business, that had dismissed my understanding of finance, that had treated me like an incompetent child, they'd learned a hard lesson about assumptions. I'd learned something too, that respect earned through demonstrated competence is more valuable than respect given automatically through family ties. The shareholders' meeting notice that had arrived that Monday morning hadn't just dissolved a board. It had dissolved years of false assumptions, dismissive treatment and underestimation. And it had established a new truth, that the daughter they'd dismissed as too poor and too ignorant to understand their business had understood it better than any of them. She just hadn't needed their permission to prove it. The stock certificates worth 67.3% of Morrison Technologies sat in my safe deposit box, physical proof of a lesson my family would never forget. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just success, demonstrated so thoroughly that no one can dismiss it. And sometimes, the person eating silently at the end of the Thanksgiving table is actually the one who owns it.